Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. Hey, welcome back, everyone. My guest today is Angela Alea with Lasso, the industry leader in platform solutions for crewing, scheduling, time tracking, payroll, and now proposals and inventory and project management tools. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, it's been a busy 10 years. Isn't that when you first sat down and kind of laid this out for me?
Yeah, it's really, I remember that day very clearly. Yeah, we sat down in your office in Dallas, and this was before we even had a product. We spent the first 2 years, we did about 350 interviews with different personas and different types of event companies. And you obviously being the thought leader you are in our space, we wanted to kind of tap your brain as well to kind of see what you were seeing. So yeah, that was a really one of our important interviews as we kind of thought about how we would start building something.
So what do you think is different about the industry that you learned about 10 years ago over that 2-year period in the industry? If you started today, what would you notice is most different?
There's so much more savvy. I think that, you've used the phrase many times before, accidental entrepreneurs, right? And so
Right.
I think that is so true. And that's really fun, when you kind of work in that environment. But I think our industry today compared to what it was 10 years ago, they are far more savvy. Part of it's because they've kind of been forced to with some things that have happened in the last few years.
Right.
And part of it is just there's more education. You out there doing a lot of thought leadership. So I think companies are becoming more equipped to do more. But I still think there is a gap in that market. And there's also a market in that gap when it comes to the ability to provide more thought leadership and more direction for these companies.
Great point. I mean, listeners, finding the gaps in the market is what strategy is all about. So Pay attention to your audience. They'll tell you where you need to go, right?
Absolutely.
So somebody admonished me the other day that we need to quit saying post-pandemic. But it's really hard. It was a consuming 3 years for all of us. Are we back to normal again? Is it business as usual from what you're seeing?
Well, I sure hope not. I hope it's not usual. And here's what I mean by that. Every company defines normal differently. And I think the good ones out there, they have an evolving definition of what is normal, what should it be? Because we should be continuously evolving. We should never get comfortable with that this is normal. And I think, over the last few years, the bigger companies, they've gotten bigger, right? And so the SMB market, they have to be evolving to compete. So business as usual, I hope not.
Well, I hope not too. If there's a new normal, that's great. My audience, our customers, when we share the same clients, think of normal in terms of revenue. For them, it's like, okay, well, we got the revenue we expected. That's normal, but we're not doing business the same way. What are some of the things that we're doing differently that's making us better? What are some positive evolutions that you're seeing besides we're just more savvy?
Well, obviously, Lasso being software, I do see a faster adoption. I see a hungrier appetite. I think our industry has been plagued by skepticism for such a long time, and probably valid for some reasons. I feel like our industry has been underserved in so many ways. We haven't done a good job tooting our own horns, being on the radar. I talk about that a lot. Our industry doesn't even have our own SIC code. I want that to change, right? I want our industry to be recognized. We've done a really good job staying behind the curtain. And so, I think they're pushing the envelope more. There's a little less skepticism. And so I think those things are kind of changing.
Do we have an inferiority complex, or do we just not understand how important we are?
I think we have a humble complex.
Really?
Right? We're used to making everybody else. And what I mean by that is we're used to making everybody else look good. That's the job, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about the people behind the scenes. And I think sometimes it's a balance. It's okay to toot your own horn. It's okay to educate people on what it takes. That's where I think, revenues go up, educating the end client on really what it takes versus just serving yes, 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 we're going to make you look good. We're going to make you look good at all costs. Well, I would take the at all cost and balance that with educating them on this is really what it's going to take for us to have a win-win kind of outcome.
Right. I think a lot of us fail to acknowledge that we are experts at what we do and that we have a moral authority and responsibility to be an expert for our clients rather
Yeah.
than just be an expert at negotiating and finding the
Yeah,
price
that's
point that
right.
makes them happy, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So standing up for the values, the systems, the processes, the finish, the things that you know how to do is important.
And have conviction about it.
Have
Don't just know it, like be
Yeah.
convicted about it and get your
Right.
client to feel that same conviction.
Right. So I think we see the same thing. You see that, that skepticism, and what I see is fear. I see a lot of
Mm,
fear-based decision making,
yeah. That's a great point.
afraid of our customers, afraid of processes, afraid of change,
Yeah.
which makes it difficult to see new ways of doing things. Which, being closely tied to software and platforms in what I do and in my previous career, the very slow evolution of rental management systems in general, people adopting CRM tools.
Hmm.
It's been a struggle in
Yeah.
our industry to get people to move in that direction. I don't know what's behind that fear. You probably have more insight into that because that's where you live every day. But I see it all the time.
Well, I think it's that word fear. It's change. It's the unknown. I'm going to keep doing things what I know works, and that's great. But I think we are approaching a time where there are the haves and the have-nots. Those that are the pioneers and get uncomfortable and are comfortable with being uncomfortable and pushing the envelope and doing the things to make their company better. And then there are the leaders, right? Typically the early adopters, and then there are the laggards. But I think there's going to be a bigger divide between what historically has been the early adopters versus the laggards. I don't think you can afford to be a laggard anymore
Right.
because technology is just changing too fast. It's very different. I mean, it's so different now than it was 10 years ago, even. Heck, it's different than it was 2 years ago.
And I'll go back, 20 years ago when I have more relevant experience, companies were trying to differentiate themselves by being a better version of a technology business, either a better version of new tech, we're buying all the latest new HD equipment, or a better version of old tech, our gear's not as worn out.
Yeah.
But now the tech is not what's important. Okay.
Yeah.
It's your business processes. It's the
Yeah.
experience your customers go through.
Yeah.
And I do see a lot of companies trying to, as we say, put lipstick on the pig
Yeah.
of the way they've always done things to try to do a better version of the old
Yeah.
them and missing the opportunity to be anything that they want to be.
So
That makes
true.
sense.
Yep. Yep. I see the same thing.
So when we were chatting earlier on another topic, you had mentioned, and I've been paying attention to this trend about slow payments to the freelance workforce. And since the heritage of Lasso, of course, is staffing and management, that's going to be near and dear to your heart. I come from the staffing world. That was my first company. I was a freelancer. I stood by the mailbox and waited for checks. But we weren't seeing this during the pandemic. There's that word again, but we're seeing it now. What's going on? What are you hearing?
Well, I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a quick
Please.
minute, but it is, it fires me up if I'm being honest. It really does, because at the end of the day, I think our industry has forgotten that every event experience is only as good as the people who make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
They're key to everything. You don't have a show without your people. You do not have a company without your people. And so why in God's name can't we figure out how to pay them, number one, fairly, and number two, quickly?
Mm-hmm.
It's really that simple. That's all they want. And so, like, what should a standard be as far as like turnaround time for pay? I don't know, a week, two at most. I don't think 30 days. Or after you're paid, you got to figure.
Right.
I mean, everyone gets deposits, right? There's a reason, and your freelancers know that. They know you get a deposit, and so, and if you have to stop making your people be last in line to get paid. Just stop doing that. And the companies that continue to hire labor agencies that do that, stop supporting that behavior. Because you're putting your show at risk, you're putting your people at risk, you're putting your reputation at risk. And so it's just not that hard to prioritize the things that can make or break your show.
Right.
So I am seeing it a lot more and more. I see more and more social posts, some from companies that I've never heard of, some from companies that we all know. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's interest rates that's making it harder for cash flow. I don't know if it's just they deprioritized it. I don't know if everyone's just gotten used to it and they just keep pushing it out more and more. So curious what you see as well, Tom.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it as well. And there's a couple of places where I see the mindset manifest. One is simply just the accounting mindset, and not to pick on people or call them bean counters. Sometimes they just don't know. They see a company name, it's in payables, they stick it in the net 30, and they forget about it, right? There's no differentiation between who they pay. They also, when they do know that these are, freelancers or staffing companies, they hear the resentment inside their own organization about how much labor costs.
Yeah.
And I think they project that onto those accounts. So those people can wait on their money.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's going, but this, that's an emotional response that people are having. But from a business standpoint, when we put somebody into payables, we're asking them to be our bank, just like your customers do to you, right? We're asking the wrong suppliers to be our bankers.
Yes.
Right? We're
100%.
asking people who are going to take that check and buy groceries, which is a lot different than the people who are going to take your check and buy more materials. And, so.
They're floating it. They're floating the companies. And they're figuring it out. They know this. They're learning now, okay, I'm now floating your company.
Right.
And they're taking note of who's doing that, who pays fast, who doesn't, who pays fairly, and who doesn't.
Yes. And if you don't have the cash flow to keep up with your business so that you can hire people who are going to make it possible for you to do your work, you've got a huge problem.
Yeah,
right? You've got right. So, and you're not asking your customers for money. You're not managing your cash flow pipeline, and you're pushing that on to people who are too weak to have a position to stand up and turn down work, because again, they got to put groceries on the table. And I don't care if they're going through a staffing company. I know what the margins on staffing companies are, right? This is a big difference than, telling not that you should make anybody wait for their money, but if you're going to make somebody wait for their money, it's got to be equipment. Equipment doesn't eat, right?
It's anybody but your people.
Anybody but people. So I'm going to keep pounding on this, because I do find it very concerning that there's that trend. I do run into the attitude that people think freelancers need them more than the employer does, and that's not true. We need people more than they need us.
Yeah.
And they will. They talk. They will figure out who not to work for.
Yeah.
And if all you do is call them last minute and then you pay them late, well, guess what? You're always going to have trouble finding people.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm kind of shocked that after 40 years in the business, I still have to talk about this, and this is still an issue. But I think we can fix it. I think we'll get people to understand.
We have to.
Yeah.
We have to. If we're going to continue to incent people to come into our industry and to invest their career and to choose us as a career path, now that more and more universities are creating that as a discipline within their organizations, don't be known as the industry that doesn't pay, and it's hard and it's grueling and they don't pay you well and they don't pay you, fast. Like, we have to fix it.
I was on a peer group call with one of my groups yesterday, and they were talking about recruiting people in a small town. They're in a small city, not a big AV community, not a lot of established freelancers. And it's like, well, we need to go to the colleges and the junior colleges and the churches and start bringing people in and training them, do basic training, which is what I did when I had my staffing company.
Yeah.
And it's like, but don't bring them in and say, hey, I'm going to train you, but I'm not going to call you for 6 months and then I'm going to make you wait 30 days to get paid.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like there's a disconnect. They think they're going to be able to get these great freelancers by treating them not well. And so I always say, like, be the company that the people you're looking for are looking for. You have to be that first. That's how you attract great people, is be a great company.
Yeah. So What let's talk about this whole community that we are in. This live event community. These folks that we love, I love, you love. Where are they getting together? What can we do to help create a better sense of community so that we're all hearing the same messages and sharing ideas more frequently, and less, waiting for one convention a year to maybe bump into
Yeah.
somebody in the aisle. What
Yeah.
should we be doing differently? What
Yeah.
would you like
Well,
to see?
there's a lot. And I think we have a really great opportunity ahead of us. So, I'll start by saying I think our industry, first, I think we're all hungry for a community, but I think that means different things for different people. Because everyone's at different stages in their careers and businesses are at different stages of maturity. So I think each stage wants something a little different out of that community. So I think we should start there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, just like if you're starting a business, right? Who is your target audience? What do they want? How do we address it? So I think there's a number of reasons why it's been hard for us to have a central community in our industry. I think number one, we have a contingent workforce in an industry that's very transactional, right? So continuity, it's hard to have that continuity with the company you're working for, the teams you're working with. I think that can be hard in our industry. I also think it takes time, commitment, money to build a community. There's not a lot of money invested into our industry, so I think that makes it hard. And then I think it also requires trust and kind of going back to that word with skepticism. So I think that's changing, but I think we all have to kind of be transparent, authentic. If we're going to build real community, you don't do that by showing up and being guarded. And I think that our industry is changing. We as a company have changed a lot in the last 10 years. I mean, gosh, when we started 10 years ago, we felt very guarded because we're like, everyone else around, why is everyone so guarded? Okay, I guess we should be guarded, right? And so then at some point, someone has to take the initiative to say, you know what, we're going to kind of break down the walls. We're going to start to have real, authentic conversations. And so I think people want that, but it requires, there's that word change again. And I think people have to be open and willing to do that. So I think there's a great opportunity and so much good that can come from it. But I think we've got a little bit of work to do before we can really all kind of gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I think about the people that you would have interviewed 10 years ago and how many of them had proprietary systems and proprietary solutions in their own unique way of doing things. And
Yes.
everybody thought that they had invented,
Yeah. They
the
solved it.
wheel, right? They've
Yeah.
solved it. And they didn't want other people to know what they were doing.
Yeah.
And even when I first started doing Jumpstart workshops, people would say, well, I want to register, but will my competitor be there?
Yeah.
I mean, that was actually the most frequent question I ever got was, well, was my competition going to be there? I said, I certainly hope so.
Yes.
Don't you ever talk to them? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I run into them. But no, you don't really have any secrets.
Yeah.
And if you did, nobody really wants to know them.
Yeah.
What we need instead are best practices. We need standards. We need to figure out what's the best way of doing something so we don't have to spend any more energy on that.
Yep.
And we can figure out the next thing that needs to be done better.
Yep.
And the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
We'll all get better, and then we can all spend more time on things that really matter.
Absolutely.
So that's my hope for community is if we start having a community where people are not afraid to sit down with their so-called competitors and have an honest conversation about what's going on and what they can do to work together and what they've learned from things.
Yep.
I think we're all going to be better off. So tell me more about what does Lasso, the product, the company, the brand see? Is there a grand unified platform for running the live event business? Or are you really going to put a lasso around everything that we do and pull us in? What doesn't make sense to incorporate into an enterprise platform for this audience?
Yeah. Well, a lot of industries have what's called like a vertical SaaS solution, right? Like Toast is for restaurants, Procore is for construction, right? There's different vertical SaaS solutions, but our industry doesn't have that. Our industry instead typically has, in all of our surveys, each company on average They use 12.8, so call it 12, between 12 and 13 pieces of software to produce one event. And in anything where it is a transaction-based, project-based, that is like ripe for mishaps, ripe for mistakes, ripe for miscommunication. I mean, so many different things. But those are horizontal solutions that don't understand our industry. And our industry, we're really, famous for saying it's so nuanced, it's so complex, it's so complicated. It doesn't have to be. We've overcomplicated. It's really not. It's running a business. But finding things that kind of speak your speak and understand what you deem as complicated or nuanced, I think that's the key. And that's where I feel like we see that as an opportunity to serve the industry and to build something from the ground up alongside our industry. So everything we do within the platform has our customers' fingerprints all over it. We've invested heavily in products, so they sit down with our customers. Now, that doesn't mean when they say, I really want this button to be pink, that we're going to do that. Right. So we say no to a lot of stuff, but helping them understand what we want to do is we want to solve the problem. So a lot of times they try to tell us the how or this is what I want it to do. And where we try to go is, what problem are you trying to solve? So we're trying to tackle it differently. So yeah, I do see an opportunity to provide one central place for these companies to do their work, to bring their freelancers on and off, to bring their vendors on and off, to run everything from RFP and proposals all the way through invoice. Now, does that mean we aspire to be everything to these companies? No, there are certain things like we're not going to do financial software. That makes no sense to do. However, we are investing heavily in having really superb integrations, not just, we integrate, we shoot this one piece of data. I'm talking superb modern day integrations. And then the other one that, we don't really have an interest in doing, because I don't think it's necessary to do, is a CRM. Mm-hmm. And so this is another change I've seen in our industry. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with some of the thought leadership that you put out, Tom, because 10 years ago, the thought of marketing, no one did marketing a few years ago. A CRM, yeah. I mean, and you see this in some of the platforms today. A CRM is a list of clients. That's not a CRM.
Right.
And MarTech today is, meaning marketing technologies, it is so robust. It changes literally every day. And what is possible, it's a little scary, it's a little freaky, with what you really can find out about your target audience and some of the intent that your customers and your prospects are doing. So CRM to us is a very mature, robust product. Like if you look at the Sugars, the HubSpots, the Salesforces, we're not going to do that. Are you going to be able to capture your clients in some basic things in Lasso? Yes, but it does not make sense to invest in the CRM, because you're going to be much better served by adopting a mature CRM system that is true MarTech.
Right. And I think when you look at the 12.5 software pieces that they're using, the least dedicated piece that they're using is CRM.
Yeah,
it's the worst. Right. Their worst compliance is in CRM.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And they're so concerned and so picky about the color of the button and what your software does is because they don't want to change how they use another piece of software.
Yeah, that's right.
And that whole fear of change and finding better processes is having to unwind this overly complex, convoluted process flow that so many companies use.
Yeah.
It's freeing once you find out that your business is actually quite simple if you uncomplicate it. If you take
the insanity already.
You're just adding layers and layers and layers, and you're never fixing what's underneath it.
Yeah, that's right. And then it's really hard to gauge when you overcomplicate. An overcomplicated process is really hard to pinpoint where the leakage is, where the opportunities are, quantify it, capture data from it, because it's just so overly complicated. Yeah. And you need that. You need good data. You need simple processes. You need to be able to very quickly understand where is the leakage in my company. And you can't when you got too many things that are convoluted.
If you can't explain your process to me, if 5 people in your company can't explain your process to me the same way, you've got problems.
Yeah, that's right.
You've got leakage. You've got constraints. You've got places where information is going to leak out. I get to see it all the time, but I get to look at it with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, it's fun to learn. But yeah, I think great opportunities for all of us to continue to get better at what we're doing and, use the right tools to do that, but actually have the right mindset to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Let's lose the fear. Let's set that skepticism aside. And let's talk to our peers, get out of our bubbles, right? So that we have a better perspective of how this industry and how important and vital it can be. So one day, maybe we will be regarded as an industry instead of a subset of a segment.
Yeah, that's right. We deserve our own standalone. That's right. To be recognized by ourselves.
We do. Well, Angela, thank you so much for this conversation and for the insight. I always enjoy talking strategy with you. It's been a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
We'll do it again sometime soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.